Welcome to Two Way. Thank you for joining, whether you're joining us on Zoom or on YouTube. Appreciate it. I'm going to be brief in my preamble today because I want to get right to Karl. There are very few people I've ever talked to in politics, journalism, government who understand how to win states. These are like individual governor's races. The Electoral College is all. And the first time I had the privilege of having Karl walk me through some maps of the battleground states in 2000, I recognize there's only a handful of people who I've ever seen do what he does. He's able to do it in part because he understands politics in a multidisciplinary way. He started out as a direct mail guy, but he understands polling and grassroots and media and everything else that goes into understanding how you win a state, including history, because he's a great historian. So we're going to run through some general things. Then we're going to go through individual state maps for the battleground states. As always, this platform exists primarily for your questions. So we'll happily take your questions. We're talking about the Electoral College and the battleground states tonight. So that's what your questions should be about. And welcome, Karl. Thank you for doing this.
You bet. Thanks for having me, Mark.
So most people follow the battleground states by just looking at the polling, or if they feel they're super sophisticated, they look at the aggregation of the polls. Just talk 30,000 feet. How do you think about the battleground states? What do you look at to figure out where things are, where things might be headed?
Yeah. Well, I do look at the polls. The problem is I distrust any single poll. And so you want to look at an average of polls. And unlike the national average where, like in June so far, I think there have been something like 12 or 13 national polls. By the end of the month, there'll be 15 polls, so one every 2 days. So the national average, it lags what's actually happening out there. You got a better sense because you got a very large, in essence, sample. You may have with 10 polls, you may have 8,000 or 9,000 sample, and you don't have that in the states. So I do look at the state polls, but I also try and pick the brains of people that I know who know something about that state to get their sense of where they think it might be going. And then I look also at the trend lines in registration and turnout, and we'll see a little bit of that as we go through these state maps. I'll refer a couple of times to some trend lines that I see that might have implication on this election, changes from last time and the time before.
Right. So as we talk about the battlegrounds, there are 6 core battlegrounds that everybody agrees on. Then there's North Carolina. Then there's the 3 that the Trump people, based on public and private polling, seem to be doing stronger in than comfort for Biden, President Biden, Minnesota, New Hampshire, Virginia. But we're going to start with the 6. And let's start with Georgia, which some people believe of the 6 may be the strongest right now for President Trump. So go ahead and put up the Georgia map if you would. And you see here for each of these maps, we've got the last 4 contests, the winner, the percentage of the vote they got, and then the popular vote that they got to win the state. And as you can see, President Biden won 2.4 million last time. So Karl, take it away. Tell us what you think about Georgia.
Yeah, well, first of all, let me say something generically about the Sun Belt states, Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia. In the public polling, in the Real Clear Politics average, Trump is leading in those 3 states by outside the margin of error. And so these are 3 states that he is likely to win unless there's a significant change, because he's up by 4 and 5 points. That's not enough, though. Last time around, he had 232 electoral college votes. Texas, Montana, and Florida all gained votes in the Electoral College. So this time around, those same states represent 235. Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada would get him 33 more and get him to 268. So even if he's doing well in these states, he's got to win one of the Great Lakes states that are battlegrounds. The interesting thing here to look at is, let me see if I can navigate the little pencil. Take a look at here. This county right here, this county over here.
I don't see your drawings. Maybe other people see them. Yeah, go ahead. Keep going.
Yeah. Those 2 counties are Cobb and Forsyth. Cobb on the west, Forsyth on the east. Take a look at them. 2008, McCain. 2012 with Romney. Up. 2016 with Trump. And same in 2020. And what happened is the blue got bluer over that course of period of time, and the red got redder. North Georgia, which is mountainous, and the tail end of the Appalachians. Look how darker red it's gotten over the period of time. This is Marjorie Taylor Greene's district over here. This is Andrew Clyde over here. South Georgia got redder. In fact, the Black Belt, which is this, if you look at 2008, you see a lot of blue in an arc going from Columbus, Georgia, all the way up to Augusta, Georgia, and you'll notice that it gets a lighter blue, and then some of the counties begin to turn red. And so what had happened in 2020 was that the Republicans underperformed in the Atlanta area while they were continuing to gain strength in the rural part of the area, and Trump came up 10,000 votes short. So this time around, it looks like the suburbs are coming back to him. These are people who are probably largely driven by economic issues, the cost of living. Immigration issue tends to be very high. I think unless something dramatically changes, Georgia is likely to end up back in the Republican column. And if it does so, in large measure, Trump has one guy to thank for this, which is the great irony, and that is Brian Kemp, the Republican governor. He has been a superb governor and has created a very good environment for the Republican Party in the state. People think of Georgia as being Georgians think of their state as being well run by a thoughtful leader, and as a result, the Republican Party, the party organization is in disarray, but Brian Kemp and the Republican statewide elected officials are generally very well thought of, and as a result, the reputation of the GOP is pretty good in Georgia today.
So if Trump does win the state, and if you look at his current support, it appears to me from talking to folks that it's very similar geographically and demographically to what powered Governor Kemp's pretty large reelection.
Right.
What's the difference between the state electing the coalition that elected 2 Democratic senators and then just a little bit later a Republican governor? Is it people switching votes in the suburbs? Is it higher black turnout? What is it that caused that change?
Well, I'd say a couple of things. First of all, take a look at the 159 counties in Georgia and rank them by the percentage of Trump's vote in November of 2020. And then rank the counties, the 159 counties in the special runoff election. In Georgia, you have to get 50% of the vote for a statewide office, and neither of the 2 Republican senators had 50% of the vote. So take and measure the drop-off, the percentage drop-off by the 159 counties, and it's almost a one-to-one relationship. That is to say, the bigger Trump's number in November, the bigger the drop-off by January, because he spent November, December, and January saying they stole your vote doesn't count, and people took him at his word. So that's one of the big things is that people have come back in the 2022 midterms, and I think they will come back in 2024 and actually turn out to vote. So these big red counties, for example, not these deep red counties up here in the north, in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district, in Clyde's district, and down here in the several districts in the south part of the state, you're likely to see good turnout in those regions. And as a result, and I think you're likely to see, I wouldn't be surprised if Cobb or Forsyth didn't do, both of them did better. I wouldn't be surprised if one of them became red again. And you're likely to see that some of these other counties like Cherokee, that are suburban counties, do even better for Trump this time around than they did last. Because again, general sense, Republicans are worth trusting, and Biden has a poor record. We're concerned about illegal immigration. We're concerned about the cost of living. We got lots of military installations in the state, and it doesn't look like Biden is a strong leader. I think all those will combine to put him in a pretty good shape. And also the get out the vote operation that the Democrats had put together largely around their former gubernatorial candidate, I think is sort of collapsing, mainly because she went off, ran for governor, and it didn't have the sort of the constant flow of money and leadership to keep it going.
Before we leave, I want to make sure your telestrator's working. I just circled Georgia. Are folks seeing Karl's telestrating, and I'm not, or nobody's seeing it?
I did one very small one right here.
Just circle 2012, just so I can see it. Just circle the 2012 there. Okay, all good. All right.
Not as good as a whiteboard, I hasten to add.
Yeah, I understand. Let's move on to Arizona, please, and stay in the Sun Belt. Yeah. And tell us what you think of how you're thinking about this state. Again, it was red until Biden won it in 20, and of course they've got a Democratic governor now. They've got 2 people elected as Democrats as senators. One's an independent. How do you see this state and Trump's lead now, even though it's been trending Democratic?
All right. This all comes down to Maricopa. Think about it. Look, between John McCain in 2008 and Biden in 2020, one county, uh, no county gets one county gets darker. Well, several counties get darker, but no county changes color except one, Maricopa. About two-thirds of the state's population lives in the greater Phoenix area. And the problem for Trump in last time around was Scottsdale right here. So, there's a little bit of a problem in the more Mormon communities like Tempe and Mesa. No problem at all in what's called the West Valley, west of downtown, places more blue collar, conservative areas like Peoria. But the real problem for Trump last time around was Scottsdale. And here we have college educated suburbanites, wealthy, affluent, well educated, lots of women who said, I can't bring myself to vote for him. And that's why, in part, he came up short. The other problem was a little bit of lack of turnout among, he didn't do as well among Mormons. I mean, it's like Utah. You have a big Mormon community in Tempe and Mesa, and which is in the East Valley, east of downtown. But the real key was Scottsdale. And again, I think the same issue that worked against him last time around, change, works for him this time around, with Scottsdale voters saying, you know what, we gave Biden a chance. He had 4 years, but we're really worried about illegal immigration, how it's adversely affecting our state. We're worried about the cost of living, and that to narrow it down, Biden has got to have a breakthrough. Either Trump has to make a big mistake in the debate, or there's got to be a breakthrough, because you can't simply solve this problem. Biden cannot simply win by getting Democrats to come home in Pima, which is the Tucson County, or Pinell, which is down here, or Cocosino, which is Flagstaff, a college town, or I can never keep them right. It's Navajo, Apache. It's Apache and Navajo. The Navajo country is historically Democrat. But
can Trump win Maricopa, or he just needs to be closer?
Well, he came within, 13,000 votes, I think it was, of winning the state. So if he came closer, if he wins Maricopa, he's going to win Arizona. But he's got to do better than he did last time around in it. Look, Trump won with 48.1% of the vote in 2016, even though the percentage that he got in Maricopa was less than what Romney had gotten in 2012 and less than what McCain had gotten in 2008.
Great. All right, let's move forward here. We could spend all night on these two states, but let's move forward to the silver state, Nevada. I pronounce it incorrectly almost always, but I think I got it right that time.
No,
Nevada.
My Nevada sister says it. My Nevada sister says
Nevada, like Vlad. So Nevada, again, it's been won by the Democrats 4 in a row. Democrats say the Harry Reid machine is somehow going to win it for them again, even though all the public polling shows he's behind. So obviously, this is another state with one big county, with some of the vote coming from Reno. But go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, look, Reno, as you can see, as recently as 2008, still voted Republican. That's the county on the northwest corner, Reno and Sparks, Nevada. It's now voting blue. Actually, it didn't vote. Last time it voted was in 2004. I'm sorry, misspoke. But nonetheless, the trend is good in this state. It used to be the rule of thumb was you had to have the registration disadvantage between Republicans and Democrats be 100,000 person deficit for the Republicans, and you had a shot at winning it. The deficit today is 32,000. Now, granted, part of that is that Republicans are doing better in registration than Democrats are doing. It also is that independents are doing better than either party is doing. So the number of independents is growing. But you saw this happen with Lombardo, the governor, who is the Clark County sheriff, who gets elected Republican governor in 2022. And he does so by cutting the margin in Clark County, Las Vegas, the county down here at the bottom, and running up the numbers in what are called the cow counties. You can see that Vegas does not get darker blue, but some of these cow counties do, including the fastest growing county in the state, Lyons County. So the trend, what people tell me is that the movement into the state and the movement out of the state is distinctly pro-Republican. What you're getting is California refugees who say enough is enough. I'm fed up. I got to get the heck out of here, and I'm going to Nevada. And then the people who are migrating out are people who said, the economic opportunities are no longer as good for me, so I'm going someplace else. But the state, we'll see obviously in a few weeks, a few months, but the trend lines are good for Republicans, and I think that explains why. And look, they were hit hard by COVID, and the economic recovery has not been as robust as it might be in other parts of the country.
What do you make of the argument that Democrats and some independent analysts make that abortion ballot measures here and in Arizona will make the difference for the Democrats?
I'm frankly, I have to be. I understand that the abortion issue matters a lot to a lot of people. I'm not certain it matters to a lot of people who are up for grabs in this election. And second of all, this is a complicated issue where people have complicated views. 2/3 of the American people did not want Roe v. Wade overturned, and 2/3 of the American people do not want abortions in the second and third trimester. And in this state, there's sort of a libertarian streak among Republicans that sort of takes part of that issue away. And you have a Senate candidate here in Sam Brown, whose wife, that in a very poignant and powerful piece of film, talked about having an abortion at the age of 21 or 22. And the response of her candidate husband was one of complete empathy and reasonable moderate views. So I'm not certain that's the thing that sells the issue here, even though it will have a ballot proposition. And in places like Michigan, that did bring out the vote in the midterms. But again, if it were there, we would be seeing it in closer numbers. Of the battleground Sunbelt states, this is the biggest margin for Trump. And I think that part of it has to do with he's got a personality that appeals to people in Vegas, in Clark County. He's a showman. He's a performer. He's had a casino. He's got a big tower with his name on it. It's sort of like, everybody gets it.
So 2 of the 6 battlegrounds have Republican governors. This is one of them. Georgia's the other. 5 of the 6 have Senate races. So let me ask you about those 2 issues. When you were doing President Bush's campaigns, how big an advantage is it to have a governor, or does it depend on if that governor has a turnout operation?
Yeah, the governor, Democrat or Republican, is an advantage for whoever, for whichever party has that governorship, because they have political machines, political organizations, and they exercise them. In Nevada, this will work on behalf of Trump because, look, Lombardo is in his first term, so he's going to want to make certain that his political apparatus is working at peak efficiency, and it's a way for him to prepare for his own reelection. So he's a relatively popular guy. And he'll have his people out there working on behalf of Trump, and people matter. Similarly, the Democrats in both Michigan and Wisconsin will have the advantage of a Democrat governor who's got a political machine, and particularly in the case of Evers in Wisconsin, has got a political machine in the state Democratic Party.
Yeah. All right, we'll get to that. The other issue that Liam Donovan and I went back and forth on the other day: is there such a thing as reverse coattails? Could strong Democratic Senate candidates help Biden win in these states where he's behind now?
They could, but look, there's one other thing here that I was talking with somebody else earlier today. Think about these Senate candidates. I think of all the polls done in Nevada, Rosen has been at 50% in one of them. One. So you take a look at these polls and you have these people, Tammy Baldwin has tended to be towards 50%, but John Tester's under 50. So here are these Democrat senators who are figures in their state and have been there for a while and have, should have put things away so that they're above 50% in the ballot. And I particularly like it, and it's not a battleground state, but Tester has spent an ungodly amount of money trashing Tim Sheehy, and it hasn't moved the ballot, and except that Sheehy has moved up slightly, and Tester's still stuck below 50. So,
right. But the reverse coattails, does that exist? Or
no? I'm not it maybe so, but I have yet to see that it happens. I mean, people are going to make a judgment about the presidential candidates and the Senate candidates. And granted, the fact that there might be in any given state more Republicans or more Democrats does have an impact. But yes, there are a few candidates. We saw Susan Collins run well ahead of Donald Trump, but I'm not certain she helped him any. I think it was simply people said, I'm voting for Susan Collins because I know her and I think she'd be best. And that didn't affect my vote, whether it was for Trump or for Biden.
All right. So as you said, even if Trump wins the 4 Sunbelt states, he needs to win something else to get to 270. Right. Is it possible, realistically possible, that he could lose those 3, but win one of the states that they're saying are now in play, In other words, could he win? Could he lose Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, but still somehow win Minnesota, Virginia, or New Hampshire, or that doesn't work?
I don't know. I'm suspect of it, and we chased, for example, in 2000, we chased Oregon, which was undergoing a Republican resurgence, and came within 5,500 votes of winning the state. And we chased Minnesota in 2000 and 2004, and came within striking distance. But you know, Trump and those two states have things going on in them that look like they would help Trump, but I'm not yet convinced that they necessarily are going to be in play. Apropos, though, of your earlier comment about Virginia, think about this. Having a successful Republican governor who articulated a moderate message on abortion, that is to say, we recognize the right to an abortion up to 15 weeks. After that, we have sensible exceptions: rape, incest, life of the mother. We have parents involved in the decisions of their teenage daughters, and we try and have all of our candidates express empathy for a terrible moment that a woman has to face that decision. And what happened? The Republicans didn't win the legislature, but they won every House of Delegates district in the state, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, that Joe Biden carried by 10 points or less, and every state Senate district that Joe Biden had carried by 9.5 points or less. So they came within 2,000 votes of winning the House of Delegates, and I'm convinced that it was because they spent too little time talking about abortion. They spent 3 weeks advertising about it. If they'd spent 5 weeks about it, the Democrat response was to say, whatever they're telling you, they're lying. You're going to take away your right to abortion. But if they'd continued to show empathy and be talking about what they were for 5 weeks, people might have said, you know what, the Democrats don't seem to have a good answer on this. All they keep saying is they're lying to you. But the guy or gal that I'm hearing from on television or the governor, seem to me to be pretty straight and shooting straight with us. And those other people seem to be in favor of no constraints whatsoever on abortion.
All right, let's take the map down, and I want to ask you a couple things and do the final three, and then we're going to open it up. First of all, we've got weaker, stronger Democratic parties, state parties in some of these states.
Yes.
And we've got the Biden campaign spending not just tens of millions on ads, but opening many more offices earlier, hiring many more staffers. Is that a big advantage for them, or that's not what presidential campaigns are about anymore?
Well, look, if it's 5 or 10 points, no, it's not. It doesn't matter. But if it is like the Real Clear Politics average for Wisconsin, I think is 1/10 of 1% and 3/10 of 1% for Michigan. It's 2% for Pennsylvania. And there it can have an effect. I've read a piece that's going to be in the Wall Street Journal tomorrow. Very thoughtful, incredibly well written, deeply researched. I think I've done a hell of a job on it myself. And I talk exactly about this issue because I think the Democrats have had the advantage of time and money. And think about it. At the end of April, they had 100 offices in, I think it's 8 states with over 300 staffers. And a couple of weeks later, they had 133 headquarters. And Trump has talked about doing, he's named a couple of state directors. Now, each party has a plan. The Republican plan is, it looks like Michael Whatley, the Republican National Chairman, said last Friday, there are only 2 things we're going to do: get out the vote and protect the integrity of the election by having 100,000 election observers. What they're talking about is they have a theory, I think, this is what I can sort of piece together, that there is a MAGA majority there. And so if they have the MAGA majority talk to other MAGAites, then they can realign American politics and swamp Biden, not only in the states that are the battlegrounds, but in those 3 states that you mentioned: New Hampshire, Minnesota,
Virginia.
I've also heard talk of like New Mexico. But in order to do that, you have to have full spectrum. The point that I make in my column tomorrow is that it's not just a question of taking your low propensity, true blue Democrats or low propensity, deep red Republicans and focusing on them. You have to have 3 other elements. You have to have something that is going after independent and swing voters. That's particularly important in this election because we not only have the undecided vote, but we have 25% of the electorate that says, I don't like either one of these guys. And many of those people now are weakly linked to somebody because we don't have 25% of the electorate saying, I'm undecided. So we've got a bunch of people who say, you know what, given the choice between 2 bad choices, I'm going with the less bad choice, which today is fill in the blank. But those
Right.
people are up for grabs. So the second thing you got to do is go after the swing and independent voters. Third thing you got to do is have a targeted effort to go after chunks of people who are part of your opposition of their coalition. We did this in 2004 and got 44% of the Hispanic vote. And because of the existence of soccer moms, closed the gender gap from 44-54 in 2000 to 48-51 in 2004, and got to 25% of the Jewish vote, highest percentage since 1988. And finally, you have to have an effort that's trying to change the numbers by going out and actively registering as many of your people as you possibly can. I detect that the Democrats are more inclined to do more of those four things than the Republicans currently are today, and they have better Democratic parties in a couple of states like Michigan and Wisconsin and Nevada.
So in Pennsylvania, which we'll talk about next, you can go ahead and put up the map, and Wisconsin, which polling shows are close, you'd
Right.
say that Republicans should be a little concerned that their capacities on the ground and state parties are not as good. Is that right?
That's correct. But I will say that Pennsylvania is one that where it might get better. First of all, they got a halfway decent state party, and then they have a terrific candidate in Dave McCormick, and he understands his campaign manager is a young guy named Matt Gruda, and Matt ran the Fitzpatrick campaigns in the congressional campaigns over there in Montgomery and Bucks, and they understand this. So working with Steve Daines, they're attempting to cobble together a first-rate voter identification and get out the vote effort that works on all four elements of these things. And yeah, so here's Pennsylvania, with the exception of Center County, that blue right in the middle. That's where Penn State is located. It really is, as James Carville said, Philadelphia on the east, Pittsburgh on the west, and Alabama in between. And we can see Trump is going to try and capture back Erie County, that little blue up at the top, but he's going to try and run up the numbers in Alabama, and then also he's going out and holding a rally in Philadelphia, hoping to get 15 or 16% of the black vote, and maybe a little bit more among young black males, and see if he can't cut the margins there.
So obviously sometimes analysts and reporters create a false choice. He needs to run up rural vote. He needs to do better with suburban voters, and he needs to, if he can, get more non-white vote. Where are you looking demographically in those areas? And it's sort of the overlay between demography and geography? Is swelling the rural counties possible, or he really needs to get more votes from the Philly suburbs?
The answer is yes. You need to do all of it.
Yeah.
And this is also a state that's in political transition. If you look at the Democratic registration edge over the Republicans, this is the biggest decline in the country, involving hundreds of thousands of fewer Democrats on the rolls than 4 years ago.
What's driving that? Any idea?
Well, part of it may just be cleaning up the voter rolls. Under HAVA, the Helping America Vote Act of 2002, states have to periodically clean their voter rolls. And one of the things that they do is pass them by the National Social Security Administration's list of dead people. And it may just be that we're finding out there are a lot of dead people on the rolls. We may also see outstate migration, which would tend to hurt Republicans. But whatever it is, there are huge numbers of people who are now no longer on the Pennsylvania rolls. And I think it's cut in half from 700 and some odd thousand to 300 and some odd thousand. And in full disclosure, I'm involved in a voter registration effort in critical battleground states, and we're doing everything we can to use technology and volunteers to diminish that margin even further.
What's that called, that effort? Or is it a secret?
It's Karl's secret project.
Okay, we'll ask you more about that. I got more Pennsylvania questions, but we've taken a lot of time here. So let's do Wisconsin quickly, please. And this is one that the public polling is very close. The Marquette poll, which is usually pretty good, had it at 50-50, suggesting no undecided, which doesn't make any sense to me. But what's your sense of Wisconsin right now?
Well, look, as you can see over time, what happened is rural Wisconsin moved into the Republican column. Yet the state is close. As you can see, Obama 56, 53, Trump 47, Biden 49. So what happened is go down here to the to the southeast corner of the state, and you have three big Republican counties: Waukesha right here, Washington right here, and Ozaukee right here. And then you also have the city of Milwaukee. And what happened is, in the last election, the city of Milwaukee turned out, and there are roughly 60,000 people in the WOW counties, as they're called, who voted for Republican for Congress, state senator, state house, but did not vote for Donald Trump for president. And there are a few more of those people in what's called the Fox River Valley, which leads up to the Green Bay area here. So not enough to really change dramatically the picture, the color of those counties, but nonetheless enough to toss it into from a 20,000 plus vote victory and for Trump in 2016 to a 20 some odd thousand vote victory for Biden in 2020.
So, how does Trump overcome what I think is one of the best state parties of either party, as well as a Democratic governor? How can he overcome that?
Well, he's got to have a great get out the vote operation of his own, but he's got a dysfunctional state Republican Party. Maybe there's a workaround possible there. But this is one of the, as you can see, this is one of the few places in the country where between 2016 and 2020, the number of red counties diminishes. Here's a deep red county in upstate Wisconsin in 2016 that's less Republican in 2020. Here's another one right here in what's called the Iron Range. Here's another one here in the Northwest Woods. Here's one just on the lake between Green Bay. And this is a problem. There's something going on there that it may be small, but incremental changes in an environment that this close could be critical.
Okay, let's do Michigan, and then we're going to turn it over to others. This is the one that I think could be the critical state, because whereas Wisconsin and Pennsylvania seem close, Trump, depending on who you believe and what you believe, seems to be doing best of the three Great Lakes states. So talk about Michigan, please.
Well, polling wise, he's doing best in Pennsylvania, but Michigan is tight, and then you can sort of sense it. First of all, this is a state where the automobile industry, ironically enough, is you got a lot of UAW members who are not enthusiastic about Biden because it takes a hell of a lot fewer union workers to make an electric vehicle than it does to make a gasoline powered vehicle. So, and then you've got some disquietude, but you've got a broken Republican Party. Pete Hoekstra, who's a terrific guy, former congressman, former ambassador, has been, dragged into becoming the state chairman after the previous chairman bankrupted the party and emptied out the headquarters. When he walked in the headquarters, there was not a stick of furniture or a computer. And as of a couple of weeks ago, was still fighting to get control of the website. But this is a state that if Trump wins Michigan, he wins the election, I think. In fact, I think if Trump wins any one of these three states, the Great Lakes states, I think he's likely to win it, given how the Sunbelt states look. I must admit, my confidants do express some concern about Arizona. But yeah, look, the state outside of Wayne County, Detroit, and some of the suburban counties, Oakland, is trending Republican. Even some of the areas in the western part of the state, like Kent County, which is Grand Rapids, have come back into the fold. You see, they were for Trump in 2020 after being for Hillary in 2016.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. I got more questions, but I'm saving them for some other day. Lauren Leader will go first, my colleague at Two-Way, who will have some questions for Karl, and then we'll take your questions. I see some hands up, but if you want to get in the conversation, please raise your hand, and we're going to take through as many as we can. Lauren.
Hi, Karl. Nice to see you. Amazing, as always, encyclopedic knowledge of every single county in America. It's truly stunning how you do that. It's got to be a really good parties.
I've been promised therapy to solve the problem. But
So I was very surprised by your characterization of Arizona, because there's so many polls. I mean, I'm sure you saw the Kaiser Family Foundation poll last week that showed the extent to which abortion ballot measures do seem to be driving much more significant voter engagement it's on the left in ways that might potentially overcome what is clearly a very motivated Republican electorate. And certainly Democrats are counting on that being a help. But the other part of Arizona is just the weakness of Kari Lake, who remains super far behind. So, just building on Mark's question from before, about the sort of clearly having Republican governors in those states, Georgia, et cetera, is a help. And in Pennsylvania, we could argue about whether, you know, the Senate candidate is strong there, or in some of these other states. Clearly in Arizona, she's got problems. You know, Kari Lake's got problems. So what's your sense about like some of these more drag Senate candidates? You know, it may not be exceptional on the Democratic side, but voters continue to reject some of the like more extreme Senate candidates in places like Arizona. So what's your sense about how that those two factors play out?
Yeah, Kari Lake's a troubled candidate who can't unite her own party. And you know, think about the state treasurer's race last time around, runs a couple of 100,000 votes ahead of the Republican candidates for Senate and governor. And it was a two-term state representative whom nobody knew. And I think that was a sign of the problem at the top of the ticket, particularly in Scottsdale, and communities like that in Arizona. I would say that the governor is a plus there organizationally. I would say that she may not be as strong as say a Brian Kemp or a you know, Lombardo in Nevada for the Republicans, or even a Whitmer or a Polis in their respective states for the Democrats, because it was so contentious last time around, and the bitterness is so much there that you even have some Republicans who say she's been too partisan since she took office. But no, yeah, absolutely, it's an advantage to the Democrats to have the governorship there, because she will be able to move resources and people. And yes, it's advantageous to have Kari Lake, who has a lot of baggage that she brings into the race.
And I guess a similar question on, before we open it up to everyone else, but a similar question on Brian Kemp, because obviously his relationship with Trump is, you know, complicated to say the least. He's clearly very popular, and there was some view that he was reelected sort of despite Trump, right? The voters who crossed over, who may have voted for the Democratic Senate candidates, but yet have supported him. So what's your sense of like how that falls out? Does Kemp go out and vigorously work on behalf of Trump in this cycle, given their very complicated history?
Well, look, it was more than just complicated. Trump recruited David Perdue to run against him.
I mean, I'm being generous in my characterization.
But having said that, Kemp will work vigorously to get out the Republican vote, because he wants to he has legislative allies, and he wants to keep that legislature in Republican hands, and with lots of people, you know, sort of indebted to him for his last couple of years as governor. So yeah, Kemp has spent a large amount of time building a separate. The party is so broken there. He and Kelly Loeffler had to set up groups to take up the responsibilities of the party, and he actually had me speak late last year to a group of the benefactors of those group. And let me just tell you, anybody with a big checkbook in Georgia was there and writing checks to him. So yeah, he is committed to keeping the Georgia legislature in strong Republican hands, and as a result, the beneficiary of that is going to be Donald J. Trump.
Lauren, thank you. Doug Workman, go ahead.
Karl, you're always so on top of things. I want to know, what about Michigan and the Middle East? You have a large Arab American population, and you have a large Jewish American population. What, you know, and Bibi is unpredictable to everyone.
Yeah, well, you've got two conflicting constituency there, and yeah, the Arab Americans in Dearborn are not going to be happy with Biden, and yet the enthusiasm among Jewish Americans may be higher to offset some of that. It's going to play a role in the Senate races where Slotkin has drawn some pointed opposition from Arab Americans. So, you know, we'll see how it all plays out. The primary had just slightly more than the average number of undeclared votes that you have in Michigan. In some of these states that allow that, you have a tradition of people voting that, and it was larger in Michigan than normal, but it wasn't, you know, hundreds of thousands of more. So, you know, but yeah, that's one of the complicating factors in Michigan. It's one of the two largest or three largest between New York, Dearborn, and Minneapolis, St. Paul. Those are the three largest concentrations of Arab Americans in the country.
Doug, thank you. Jacqueline, Mary, go ahead. Unmute, please.
How are different states, swing states, reacting to the convictions against Trump? I'm just curious if there are patterns that are interesting in certain states because of their culture or anything like that.
You know,
Great
we
question.
don't don't have enough polling really to break it out state by state. We can say that it's had a persistent and visible effect. If you take a look at the polls that were done in the month of May before May 30th, virtually every one of the national polls had Donald Trump ahead. If you look at the polls that have been conducted since May 30th, you'll find that I may be off on this just a little bit, but like 11 polls in June. As of a couple of days ago, and I think it was 3 Trump ahead, 3 Biden ahead, or maybe 4 Trump ahead, 3 Biden ahead, and 3 where it was tied. But clear movement of a couple of points in Biden's camp. Now, I'm not certain that we've seen the end of this, because I think this whole thing about the conviction is going to take a while to work their way through. And you have conflicting emotions. You have a lot of people saying, I'm really upset. I'm unsettled by the former president being found guilty on 34 charges of falsifying business records for hiding a hush money payment to a porn star. And on the other hand, you have people saying, well, no matter how I feel about him, this seems to me to be political. It's the very partisan, DA of Manhattan. And the more I hear about it, the Biden Justice Department took a pass, the Federal Election Commission took a pass, the predecessor took a pass. I mean, this seems to be hokey, and particularly, I think one of the key events is going to come up on the 11th. If the judge says, we're going to fine you for $150,000 and community service and blah blah. That's one thing. If he sends him to jail, all hell is going to break loose, and more people will consider it to be politically motivated. Ironically enough, the more that it is a, sort of a no time and a financial slap on the wrist, the more people are going to say, well, you know what, he did hide that money and blah blah blah. And look, I have to say, look, the classified documents case is a serious case. I was in that place for 7 years, and if I'd walked out with a collection of classified documents, we'd be having this conversation from the visitors lounge at Fort Leavenworth. So that's a serious case, but this thing really does bother me. My touch point on this is Andrew McCarthy. This was a misdemeanor until you claimed that it was in furtherance of a federal crime, a felony, namely a violation of the federal election law. When did the Manhattan DA become the official who investigates and prosecutes violations of the federal election law? I think this thing is a stretch, and I think it was very wise for the Democrats to say what they said and then stop. But if in the debate Biden makes too much of this, as time goes on, this may not be helpful to him. And similarly, it could continue to be helpful to Trump if it looks like it was a put up deal, a completely political deal.
Karl, the Biden campaign has spent over $100 million on ads in the battleground states. They've started to mention President Trump being a convicted felon. Have their ads not seemed to be effective because ads don't really sway voters in a presidential race, or because they haven't produced a good ad yet?
Well, I'd say those two things could be true. The other thing is that this race is a race in which the cumulative effect is going to have an impact. At the end of the day, when you have a quarter of the people saying, I don't like either one of these, and most of those people are picking somebody there, this debate, for example, could snap people and move them in a direction that is impossible for anybody to recover. Because we won't have a debate in 10 days or 2 weeks where they can erase the memory of their bad first debate. It's 11 weeks off. And because we have deep concerns about both of these people. Is Joe Biden up to it, or is he way too old? Can he string together 2 sentences? Has he got what it takes to, be on the ball? And the other guy, is it all about the rage and anger that he has about, losing and not being able to admit it? And are both of these guys going to be able to do something for me and my family and our country and our communities to make things better? Are they up to the job? And I think those kind of intangibles are affected only in a small way by each ad, but the cumulative effect, at some point, people take all this information in, collect it, analyze it, store it, and then at some point say, I got to make a decision, and I got to make my final decision.
Matthew Bartlett from the Sununu Battleground state of New Hampshire. Go ahead.
Down here in the swamp right now, doing my best to MCAT with the hat. We talked about ads, talked about the debate. What about the VP pick? Is that a chance to, change, some of the efforts in the battleground states? Does one candidate, help more? Does JD Vance help in Wisconsin? Does Rubio speaking Spanish help?
I recommended. I read a book. I can't recommend it to you because it is filled with so much math, your head will explode. But it's by two brilliant young political scientists entitled "Do Running Mates Matter?" And the case that they make is that no running mate helps you win a state you otherwise wouldn't win. No running mate helps you make durable gains within a constituency that you otherwise wouldn't have a good performance with. The only durable impact of a running mate is, do people look at him and say that person could be president of the United States? And if they say yes, then you're the presidential candidate's numbers go up for judgment and ability. Ronald Reagan says, I'm going to pick the guy who is my principal opponent. He was ambassador to the UN, ambassador to China, director of the Central Intelligence Agency, respected member of Congress, chairman of the Republican National Committee, and his numbers go up. John McCain picks Sarah Palin, and his numbers for judgment go down. So J.D. Vance, my point about Vance would be he got elected U.S. Senator in an open race in Ohio by 7% after a group that I helped found, American Crossroads Senate Leadership Fund, spent over $80 million to get him elected. And at the same time that he won election in an open race for the Senate, the rest of the Republican ticket won by 24 to 27 points, including the incredibly colorless but unbelievably sweet and able governor of the state, Mike DeWine. So I don't see that J.D. Vance is going to be able to. People are not going to say, well, geez, that he's bringing a lot to that. That guy's ready to be president. I think they'd say, young hot dog. And the question is going to be, who does Trump pick? Is it a sycophant? Is it somebody who looks like they're going to be able to affect MAGA? Or is he going to pick somebody who people say that person's up to the job and a good partner to President Trump? And if so, then he'll gain, particularly since you probably run into the same thing. I run into people all the time. They say, I don't like Trump. I like his policies, but he's a terrible human being. But Joe Biden is too old, and Kamala Harris cannot be president of the United States, so I'm voting for Trump. And Trump can accelerate that if he picks somebody good. I've got a wild theory that he might end up naming somebody who's not on the list, because remember, he is the executive producer of The Apprentice, and surprises work.
Any idea who that would be?
Mike Pompeo.
Yeah. Your friend Paul Gigot expressed it, and the editorial board of the Journal expressed a clear preference for Burgum over Vance and Rubio. Does Burgum seem a safe choice to you, or given that he's never run before, potentially risky?
No, I've known him for a long time, and I think if it came down to those three, he would be the best, because people would say, the guy built a company, successful in business, sold it for $1 billion to Microsoft, but literally started the business by taking a loan out on the family farm. And he's been successful in business. He's been a successful governor. He's from a state that produces energy. He can talk with, great strength about agriculture and industry and energy. And I think people would say, yeah, that's a guy who, same thing that they in an obviously different set of things that they would say if it were Youngkin or Pompeo. But I think people would look at any one of those three, and Tom Cotton, for example, another one, and say that those people are capable of being president.
Who would you tell him to pick if everybody was in play?
I'd probably tell him to pick somebody that I knew he wouldn't pick, because I would recommend it to him. Rove, he's such a total loser. Yes.
Charles, unmute, please. Ask your question.
Hey, do you think so? Nikki Haley had a point where in the past 20 years, the Republicans have never won the popular vote. Is that even in the question, or is it this electoral gymnastics that we're still going to have to play, or that the Republicans are still going to have to play?
Look, that could be. I mean, in 2016, Trump runs millions of votes behind Hillary Clinton, yet wins the Electoral College, the fifth such person to do that. And in 2020, yes, Joe Biden gets 7 million more votes than does Donald Trump, but it comes down to 45,000 votes in a handful of states. So Trump could very easily win the Electoral College and lose the popular vote again.
Do you think turnout will be about the same, higher or lower than 20?
My gut tells me that the percentage of the voting age population will be lower. Now, we may have more votes cast because the country continues to grow, but no, I think this campaign. We think back to 2012. We've been in a secular period since 1996 in which the percentage of the VAP, the voting age population, has increased each election, with the exception of 2012. And what happened then? It was a negative election. It was, Barack Obama saying, I can't win just by making this a referendum on my performance. I got to make it a choice, and I'm going to paint that guy as a heartless plutocrat who stuck his dog on top of his, station wagon and has an elevator in his garage in La Jolla and could care less about you. And it dipped. And I think this election is going to be in its own way negative, and as a result, we might see a decline in the voting age population.
In the 6 states, we don't yet know exactly who will be on the ballot. And we don't know that, for instance, Kennedy, who's on the ballot in Michigan, he may not make enough ballots to run, right?
Right.
What's your view of if you see differences between the 6 states, what's your view of other candidates and how they impact the race in those 6?
Well, the Libertarian and Greens will be probably on the ballot in all 6, and they will not get elected, but they could, just like in 2016 in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, Jill Stein got more votes than Hillary Clinton lost by. And in 2020 in Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin, the Libertarian candidate, Jo Jorgensen, anybody know what Jo does? She's a lecturer in psychology at Clemson University. She got more votes than Donald Trump lost by. And I think that's likely to be the case this time around. The question is, how many states are RFK going to get on? The others have got their pretty well locked in the states. And how many states is Cornel West going to get on? If Cornel West, Jill Stein, and Robert Kennedy Jr. get on the ballot in Michigan, it's a 3x problem for Joe Biden.
There's no doubt in your mind that Kennedy in Michigan hurts Biden more than Trump?
Yeah, I assume that he's got to make a decision. Is he going to be environmental crusader, or is he going to be vaccine denier? And my gut tells me that at the end of the day, he decides the Kennedy name is more important than the cause that has basically, that he's championed the last 5 or 6 years of vaccine and alternative health theories. He's built a rather substantial organization with a big mailing list and a large megaphone that he has to communicate with its members. But I think he's smart enough to realize that's not enough to get elected on.
And if you're the Biden campaign or the Trump campaign, how do you view the way to minimize the vote of the Libertarian and the Green candidates?
Well, not an easy answer, because they're sort of in control of their own destiny. It's to have the most compelling message to cause people to say, I want to vote for that guy, as opposed to, you know what, I want to throw my vote away. And in fact, this is going to be a big issue in the debate. And this may be a weird theory, but my theory in the debate is if Biden can come in and be cogent for 90 minutes and make the case that he is doing things that cause people's lives to be better, if not today, then in the months and years ahead, and goads Trump into losing his temper and coming unraveled, then he might be able to win the debate. On the other hand, if Trump comes in and he's Mr. Calm and prosecutes the case, don't get me wrong, says this is a referendum on how Joe Biden has done on inflation, the cost of living, on the border, and makes a powerful case, but nonetheless comes across as reasonably sane and not out of control, then it's going to be very hard to dislodge him. But both of those scenarios depend upon the candidates being able to control themselves and being able to execute a debate strategy for 90 minutes.
Carl, can I ask you a turnout?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Lauren. Lauren. Yeah, of course.
Thanks, appreciate it. Carl, can I ask you a turnout question? So, I mean, historically, obviously, the last couple cycles, Democrats have been hugely helped by surges in turnout, especially among younger Americans. We're seeing that this time some of the motivation is higher, or some of the loyalty to Biden is actually higher in the 50 and older, among 50 and older voters. And he obviously has some complex challenges with younger voters, given, Israel and some of the other sort of strange things that have been splintering the young left. What's your sense about, does surges in turnout continue to help Biden in this cycle? or does something different happen in terms of all the normal rules of what turnout usually means for Democrats?
Yeah, this issue of enthusiasm and likelihood to vote, there's no really good measure of it. I mean, if I were Biden, I'd be deeply concerned about the lack of enthusiasm among the young Black and Hispanics, and particularly among young Black males and younger voters in general. And I'd look at the measure of how many of them say they're voting for Trump today. You know, some polls 16% of young Black males, 18% of young Black males voting for Trump. The question is, what's it going to be in October, November? Because gravity tends to take hold. And think about what would happen to Trump if, rather than getting the numbers he's getting today among young voters, he's getting numbers that are closer to what he got last time around. And similarly, what happens if older voters who are moving the other direction suddenly wake up and say, you know what, I was planning on Biden, but his performance in the debate or Trump's performance on the campaign trail. And then the final thing is how, an unenthusiastic vote counts the same as an enthusiastic vote. And I know plenty of people who've been enthusiastic about a candidate who said, well, you know what, election day rolled around and I didn't vote because something else came up. So the quality of the ground game that's where it comes into play. If you've got enough people pinging them with text messages and phoning them and knocking on their door, you can take an unenthusiastic voter and make them look more enthusiastic than an enthusiastic voter who doesn't have that kind of support system.
Roger.
My question is, in general, what percentage among which demographics does Joe Biden need to win the election? Conversely, in general, what percentage among which demographics does Donald Trump need to win the election?
Well, that's a big, complicated question, and let me try and simplify it. Whoever wins the independent vote is likely to win. Whoever wins a majority of the double doubters, the double dislikers, will win. And whoever comes closest to matching their percentages last time around among to either matching, or in the case of Trump, Biden, in the case of Biden matching, and in the case of Trump exceeding his numbers among Hispanics, is likely to win. But look, it's a complicated puzzle with, this is what campaign strategists and pollsters and spend an infinite amount of time trying to figure out what is our target within that particular group, because it ripples through the entire process. Think about this: a 1% decline in Black turnout in Georgia, even if Biden gets the same percentage of the Black vote that he got last time around, a 1% decline wipes out his 10,000 vote victory margin in Georgia. That's how these things can have such a significant effect.
Karl, I don't want to give away everything because we don't want you to be dislodged as a Fox News analyst. But if people here want to understand the battleground states between now and November, besides looking at polls, what can they look at? What can they read to try to keep up with you?
My weekly column in the Wall Street Journal.
No, I don't mean your work. I mean your capacity to follow the battleground states. What should they look at? Voter registration? Should they look at ads?
Well, look at voter registration, the trends. Look at the ads. Look at how many times somebody's going someplace. Watch for the news. One of the key things that led me to believe in 2016 that Trump might actually have a shot at winning was an article in the Washington Post talking about the dissatisfaction of Michigan Democrats as to all of their volunteers being bused to Iowa. And I'm thinking to myself, Trump can win Iowa and lose the race, but Hillary can't lose Michigan and win the race. And
last question. In most campaigns I've ever covered, the most precious commodity is the candidate's time. And you'd send a candidate into a media market, and then the data people would say, we got a bump and it sustained or it didn't. These two candidates, as best I can tell, they don't really move numbers when they go into places. They don't get nearly the coverage, particularly this incumbent president on local news. when President Bush went places, there'd be the day before there'd be coverage. Here he comes. Then he's here. Live coverage of Air Force One landing. Now he's leaving. That just doesn't happen. So do the candidate visits, you think, impact the chances of winning, or they're not? These two candidates just don't do that.
Yeah, no, I think it does, but I don't think this is the normal election. I mean, I think we have deep feelings about both of these guys. I mean, this is, the last time we had two guys who'd run against each other before was 1956 with Eisenhower and Stevenson. The last time we had two former presidents run against each other, one having beaten the other, was 1892. So we're in a different circumstance with two very different candidates. One guy who has dominated the media, whom we have a fascination, love him or hate him, you're fascinated by him. And the other guy who has been, in our public life for 60 years. So I think this election is closer than most contests, and it is more unpredictable than anyone in my lifetime. I have no idea who's going to win. If the election were today, Trump would win. Who has the upper hand? Trump. But the idea that this is somehow foreordained is beyond reason. I mean, this is going to be one wild contest, and one of the wildest moments is going to be Thursday night. It could easily end the contest. If somebody really screws up tomorrow night, it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, for them to recover. But on the other hand, if everybody does okay, everybody's adequate, this thing could go on and on and on.
Karl, thank you. Really appreciate you making time with us for this hour. Thanks everybody else for joining. We'll see everybody soon back here, and we'll see Karl on television probably within moments. Karl, thank you.
Thanks for having me. And now I'm going to be graded by my sister, who's been forced to listen to this entire thing. She's saying, we're keeping a list of how many times I said, look, and
Condolences to her.
Thank you both. Thanks both, Karl and his sister, and thank you all for joining. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
On another two-way. Have a good evening.